Today's pre-cal lesson is about rectangular coordinates. Again, this should be review for you from Algebra 2, but I do want to make sure that we're on the same playing field and kind of understanding the same type of information because lots of this stuff is going to be used throughout the semester. Starting with Part A, we want to review what's called the Cartesian plane. In pre-cal, we talk about different types of numbers. So at first, we're going to stay with the Cartesian plane, Cartesian numbers, stuff that you are familiar with. In particular, we're talking about graphing here within this plane of x and y axis. You should be familiar with that. Also, the dot in the middle, or the place in the middle, is called the origin. And we can name our quadrants, quadrant 1, 2, 3, and 4. Right here. That's the coordinates, our x and y for each one of those. In class, we reviewed real quick how to plot some points. And I asked them to plot the points -1, 2, 3, 4, 0, 0, 3, 0, and -2, 3. So I'll kind of review that with you now. Hopefully you know where all of these things are. You know where positive and negatives go for x and y. And just to be a quick review, if we have -1, 2, that's point A. 3, 4, we're going to go over 3 and up 4. 0, 0, right there. 3, 0, 1, 2, 3, and 0. And -2, 3. I think this might have actually been -3 in class, but that's okay. Things we reviewed. This spot again is called the origin. It's not in any of the quadrants. This point is in quadrant 1. These two are in quadrant 2. This point here is not in a quadrant, and it's also not said to be in the origin, but rather on the x-axis. So that's just some terminology. Also, in your homework, there's some problems that say things like, well, x and y are greater than 0. And we talked in class, not in the notes, but when we were working on our assignment, about the fact that that means when these two numbers are multiplied, they're greater than 0, or positive, because numbers bigger than 0 would be 1, 2, 3, 4, on and on and on. For two numbers multiplied to be positive, it's either going to be a positive times a positive or a negative times a negative. The place where x and y are both positive is quadrant 1, and where they're both negative is quadrant 3, so this would occur in quadrants 1 and 3. You will have some material like that on your test, so be sure that you study that. The next thing we talked about in class was the distance formula. Again, this should be review, but you may not have covered this since about geometry. So that formula is d equals the square root of x2 minus x1 squared plus y2 minus y1 squared. And in conjunction with the distance formula, we're going to use Pythagorean theorem to show some things about triangles and their vertices. For example, number 2. I want you to show that the points 2, 1, 4, 0, and 5, 7 make a right triangle. Okay? To do that, we're going to use the distance formula and calculate the distance between each of the 2 points, so these two, and these two, and then we're going to plug them into the Pythagorean theorem. The first distance, if I use my x2 and x1, that would be 4 minus 2 squared, and then my y's, 0 minus 1 squared. 4 minus 2 is 2, squared is 4, -1, or 0 minus 1 is -1, squared is 1, and so the distance between these 2 points is the square root of 5. Now I want to find my second distance. If it'll help you, go ahead and label your points, and then you can just change them for the next one. So here, when we did this one, we did 7 minus 0. Oh, I did the y's first. In this case, it really doesn't matter. But it's probably a better habit to try to do x's first. I've been switching gears here between slope, so I have y on the brain. 7 squared is 49, 5 minus 4 is 1, squared is 1, so that's the square root of 50 between these two pieces of our line. Fighting my paper here. Hold on 1 second. And finally, distance 3 between the first and last point is 5 minus 2 squared plus 7 minus 1 squared. 5 minus 2 is 3, squared is 9. 7 minus 1 is 6, squared is 36, and this one is the square root of 45. Now, I asked in class which one is the longest side. Everybody answered that it had to be the square root of 50 because it was the largest number. They are correct. If I plug that into the Pythagorean theorem, I have the square root of 5 plus the square root of 45 equals the square root of 50, if we said that that was the hypotenuse. So, let's double check that. Each of these values squared, cancel, 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 and 5 plus 45 equals 50. And that is absolutely true, and so we have shown that these are vertices of a right triangle. The last thing we did in class was to practice the midpoint formula. In particular, we're going to apply this to some business models or strategies to be able to figure out some important information. The midpoint formula is x1 plus x2 divide 2 and y1 plus y2 divide 2. Now, think of that as a coordinate point. Whether you graph it or not, you want to average your x values and average your y values. The example we looked at class, I'm not going to write all the way out, I'm just going to tell you about it. We talked about FedEx's annual revenue, so the amount of money that they earned. It's shown by this table, where this is the year, and the y-coordinate is the money. So in 03, that's what we're looking for. They gave us 02 and 04. 02 was 20.6 billion, and 2004 was 24.7 billion. So now we're looking for this one. We know that 03 is between 02 and 04, so we're going to use those values. 2 plus 4 divide 2, comma, 20.6 plus 24.7 divide 2. And this will give me 3. On this one, I want to be sure that I add my top first and then divide by 2. And that's going to give me 22.65. To finish that out, because in class and in general I gave this problem as a sentence, you would need to write a sentence to finish this out. So we said FedEx earned $22.65 billion in 2003. And that's, of course, an approximation. Your homework on this is a worksheet. Let me know if you have questions.